Hey YouTube, Kevin Clear here with a knife video for you. I want to start off by saying this knife, the Buck Marksman, it's model number 830, was a total surprise to me. Now it wasn't a surprise that I was getting it. You know, I was the one who sent the PM, made all the arrangements to get it, got it for a great price. I was really happy with that. But primarily when I picked it up, it was for this channel. It was because, you know, as a collector, I was interested in the lock. I wanted something a little nicer from Buck that was, you know, let's see what they're putting out there for $100. You know, let's check it out. Now, that's the retail on this. I did not pay anywhere near retail on this. That's why I was like, yeah, it's okay to just check it out of curiosity. So that was my expectation. Okay, it's just going to be a knife to check out. I'll probably sell it after I've had it for a couple of weeks and been able to do a review on it. So this knife comes in the mail probably a couple months ago now. And I get it out, and I'm like, hey, this, you know, it's a cool knife. I'm really interested to check it out. And then, I open it, and I'm looking at the blade. I'm like, hey, size and weight is really good. I like the blade shape. The blade functions very well. And after messing with it for a little while, I decided, let's check out the flipping action. And so I go ahead and flip the knife open, and I'm like, whoa. Fast, smooth, easy to work. This knife flips faster than any knife I have, even though it doesn't have this super crazy strong detent, which is the big thing with flippers these days. The detent is extremely comfortable. You know, I'm like barely touching it, and it just flies out. And so I'm like, this is amazing. Completely blew me away. Now, I say all this to say that it totally defied all of my expectations. I was expecting a knife that would be okay, and you know, I'd check it out and then probably cut some stuff with it, and then it could move on. There's no way this knife is moving on. It is phenomenal. I cannot tell you how good it is in terms of toughness, in terms of size and weight, quality, all the things that I look for in a folding knife. Now this is marketed as a tactical knife. I hate that word. I prefer to say designed for combat or a combat folder. And so that's the way Buck is marketing it, and I think absolutely, if you're, you know, law enforcement, a soldier, whatever, this knife is going to serve you very well. The only questionable thing about it is if you're in a really harsh environment, it does have ball bearing pivot. But I got to get back to what I'm trying to say by way of introduction. So, last two things I want to say before I get into the specifics of our discussion are this. It's really exciting to see this from Buck, okay? And the reason it's exciting is because it kind of puts them back in contention. You know, if you were to try to make a list of some of the great folding knife companies, you know, you'd say, well, Buck used to be great, but now, you know, we've moved on to like Spyderco and Kershaw and Zero Tolerance and Benchmade, and Buck isn't really doesn't have a lot of offerings that would compete with them. They have some, you know, and I know the Select and the Vantage has been really good. I'd actually really like a Buck Paradigm just because of the interesting locking mechanism. Anyway, to get back to the point, it's cool that Buck has come out with this because this thing will compete and even exceed in a head-to-head comparison. This will beat a lot of other offerings, okay? Size and weight is great, strength and durability is great, blade shape and functioning is great. It really checks all the boxes. Things that you're only used to seeing in higher end stuff, this really does it well. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing that's cool about this is a real success from Grant & Gavin Hawk. This strap lock is great. Okay, it is really cool. It's extremely strong, and I'll speak to the specifics of this again when we get to that, but it's strong, it's functional, it just works really well, and so we've got to give them credit as well. Okay, so that's my introduction is done. Let's get into the specifics of this knife, but I just wanted to put out there how surprised I was when I got this and how much I've fallen in love with it over a few months of owning it and using it. It is a great blade. Okay, now let's start off with size and weight. Here's the specific things that make it that great. Size and weight, it really nails size and weight. Okay, this knife is 8 1/4 inches overall, 3 1/2 inch blade, 4 3/4 inch handle, and 4.1 ounces. So very good. You know, it's light enough to carry all the time, and for that light weight, okay, you are getting a super strong knife. I probably should have put this in the lighten up video, but I just didn't think of it. But you know, it is a very capable folder. Now it is over 4 ounces, so you know it kind of didn't fit. But 4 ounces is not at all heavy, and what you're getting for that is phenomenal. And in fact, I would say this really beats a lot of other knives in that weight category in terms of strength. You know, when we talk about a super overbuilt folder, super strong hard use folder, usually we're willing to accept some more weight, right, to get that extra strength. Here you're getting all the strength you could ever want, but only for 4 ounces. So it's fantastic that way. Let's go ahead and, now that we've given you the size and weight on this, talk about the blade. Again, the blade is another win. I mentioned this in the Vantage video, that the blade, although the quality is a little iffy and the centering is terrible, generally speaking, the edge geometry is excellent. And of course, the heat treat is excellent as well. Now, what you have here, and you can see the similarity, by the way, is a very, very similar blade shape, but improved, okay? The drop point is a little nicer, the hollow grind, everything is cleaner, the grind is extremely good, you know, very, very consistent, very even, which is really nice to see on a production knife. I have expensive production knives that don't have an even grind, okay? So this is really, really well done. It's a very, very thin hollow grind, slices like you wouldn't believe. You know, you can cut even the finest things and it's just going to slip right through. It's like a lightsaber, okay? The blade shape is phenomenal and it's going to beat, and here's where I said this before, but this blade shape is going to beat a lot of other offerings in this category. You know, better probably than most of the knives in my collection in terms of edge geometry. And Buck is known to do a good job with edge geometry, okay, so fantastic. It's 154 cm, and guess what? I'm going to zoom in because I want to show you this, and I'll stay zoomed in for a little while because there are some technical things we should look at here. So, check this out right here. You have the Paul Boss little flame symbol. That is really, really cool. And if you don't have a knife that has this, you should try to get one because Paul Boss is a genius when it comes to heat treatment. There are companies and even custom makers who send their stuff to him to heat treat because he does such a good job. And of course, he works for Buck. And so you're getting a fantastic, you know, so 154 cm is already a good steel. But when it's heat treated by Paul Boss, you even need to elevate it to a higher level because he does such a phenomenal job with that. Okay, you can also see, look down here where the plunge grind is created, very, very well done. And then over on this side, you've got Buck USA. It's nice to have a knife that's made in the US and a Grant and Gavin Hawk collaboration. So that's the blade, beautiful drop point, just exceptional performance out of this blade. If I'm gonna, you know, I've been thinking about making a video of the best performing blades that I have in certain categories. This will be in that video. This is just a phenomenal, phenomenal blade. It does everything you could want it to do and does it beyond what you would expect. It really even defies your expectations in terms of performance. Okay, so great, great blade. Now, let's move on to lockup and deployment. Let's talk about lockup first because that's kind of different, okay? You've got this strap lock, and the way it works is it creates detent through a little notch here on the, through like a little, I don't know what you call it. I'm gonna open the blade partially. Okay, see that back corner, this little piece of metal that's sticking up right there? That piece is what creates the detent. It is under this strap, and the detent is created by the fact that when you try to open the blade, see how the strap has to move back? So that pressure creates the detent, and that detent is phenomenal. I mean, it's not too weak, it's not too strong, it is just right, and it's just right to make the blade fly open, okay? So this strap creates detent using this little piece of metal that you can see just sticking out here. When the knife is all the way closed, that little piece of metal, I'll see if I can show you this, it's going to be difficult on camera, but there you go, right at the end of my pinky fingernail, you can see there's a little piece of metal there. That is what's pushing against this strap and creating the detent, okay? So When the knife is closed, it stays closed. The retention is fairly good. As you can see, I'm not getting it to open. Now if I do this really hard, I think, let's see if I turn it upside down. Yeah, I can wing it open upside down. Okay, but it's more than sufficient detent for anything that you're going to be doing. Now, so there's how the detent's created. Then when the knife is open, it becomes a strap, okay? So in order for this knife to close, you would literally have to either pull the end of this, shear this completely off, or stretch this out enough that you would get enough distance for this to let go. And good luck doing that. As probably some of you know, but if you have any background in engineering or knowledge of engineering, if you can get a piece of steel in tension that is trying to be stretched, it is very, very strong. Okay, a thin piece of rebar this big will hold tons and tons of weight if you just pull straight on it. Okay, steel is exceptionally strong in tension, and what's genius about this lock is it is one of the few locks that works by putting steel in tension rather than compression. Okay, so it's a fantastic design, and it's going to be exceptionally strong. Just think about this for a second. How much force is it going to actually take for you to either stretch or shear this piece of steel right there? Right? That's the only way that this can fail. And so you have a great deal of strength here. Now, there could be some wear, and they've anticipated the potential for this to wear a little bit as this opens and closes, dozens of times. What if this starts to wear and I get a little bit of blade play? Well, there's actually a little screw. You see this little hole right here by my finger. Make sure I'm not covering it up. There's a little hole right here by my finger. I'll see if I can get it in the light. Inside that hole, there's a screw that can actually adjust the location of this back piece here. And so you can pull it back, thereby retightening this little lock if it wears over time. So in addition to being extremely strong, the other cool thing about it is it functions sort of like a stainless steel lock bar insert, where if blade play or issues develop over time, it can be adjusted, which is, again, brilliant. So you've got to give a lot of credit to Grant Gavin Hawk for this locking mechanism, because it is extremely smart. Okay, really, really well done. And we're not quite done talking about it, because it actually contributes to deployment as well. Okay, most knives, when you open them up, let's use our Vantage for this. Okay, I'm opening this knife, right? Well, what's happening right now is that my liner lock is still putting pressure on the side of this blade. So there's this constant little bit of friction with the lock until it locks into place, okay? So there's always friction against this blade that's hampering the movement just a little bit. On this, once you defeat that detent, the blade just swings freely. There's no interference with the movement of the blade coming from the locking mechanism. And if you've got a frame lock, if you've got a liner lock, there's pretty much every other locking mechanism out there, especially backlocks. We've made that comment about cold steel lots of times. There's this interference with the movement of the blade coming from the lock. In this case, not at all. There's literally, the lock is not touching the blade anywhere at any time until you get to this point where that little hook has to pop into place, and now the knife is locked. So I'll show you that one more time so you can understand how that portion works. So as you open the knife, there's this little notch here, and the notch just lifts that a little bit. There you go, you see the lift, pops into place, and the knife is now locked. And it's very, very securely locked. The other cool thing about this is, unlike some locks that you can, if you don't deploy the knife hard enough, they don't lock all the way, you can be pretty much as gentle as you want to be with this. Let's see if I can just, there you go. There's a very gentle deployment and perfect lockup every time, okay? The design of this lock is phenomenal. And so, in fact, it even contributes to the smoothness of deployment. It is a caged ball bearing system. There are little red ball bearings in here. And so it's a ball bearing pivot system, really, really consistent. And I will say this, I have not had to, the first day it came, there was a little bit of side-to-side play. I could get a little bit of movement, tightened up the pivot screw, which is just a Torx bit, and I haven't touched it since. And I always do this for a couple of weeks just to see what happens. Pretty much every knife, after a while, through use, especially knives that are fun to flip like this one, through use, that pivot loosens up. This pivot has not moved, and I have not put any Loctite on it or anything like that. Almost any knife I have Loctite on the pivot. This one has none, and it's not been an issue for 2 months, okay? It has never moved at all. It's perfectly solid, which again is a real win. Now, the one thing I will say about this lock is that, so lockup and deployment is phenomenal. The only thing I will say is there's a bit of a learning curve, okay? This is the way I like to close the knife one-handed, just by pinching it here and lifting the lock with my index finger. You can lift it with your thumb in a more traditional hold, but you gotta make sure you keep the fat of your hand out of the way of the blade, okay? You really have to watch that. One other little issue that I will talk about, and I'm gonna try to get this to happen. In fact, what I'm gonna do is just defeat the detent, and then it's a little more common. So I've opened the knife, and I'm gonna try to flip it. Watch how the blade bounces back. You see that? See how quickly it bounces back? So if you don't if you don't get a full lockup, it'll bounce back. And if you have put your fingers in the way of that in the meantime, there it is. See it bounce back? It's really hard to get it to happen if the knife is locked. But if it's not, see how there's no detent now? So see how quickly it bounces back? It happens rarely, but it can happen, and if you did have your fingers in the way, you would be cut. Now, you probably wouldn't be badly cut because it's not a heavy blade, but it would bite you for sure. Okay, so that's lockup and deployment. Phenomenal. This lock is a win. Buck should do this all the time. It's a fantastic mechanism. Okay, the only challenge it provides is figuring out a way to make this accessible to your fingers so you can unlock the knife. Okay. Now, let's get into the handle, because the other thing that could cause some questions, I'm going to come back out here a bit. I'll stay zoomed in a little more. But you look at this handle and you go, but look at all this jimping here. Is it uncomfortable when you're holding the knife? And the answer to that is not at all. In any common grip, reverse grip, hammer grip, saber grip, perfect. No problems at all. There can, I don't know. I'm trying to think of how else I might hold the knife. That's pretty much all the ways I generally hold it. You're not going to get any issues. Maybe if you somehow, let's see, draw cut. Maybe with a draw cut you could get a little bit, like the fat on my pinky does catch on here a little. This would be pulling down toward yourself in the opposite direction. The opposite way, it's not so bad, okay? Pulling toward yourself this way, nothing going on there. So very, very comfortable. It is an aluminum handle, which means it's nice and light, but also strong. And so again, it's a real win. Very, very comfortable, and the retention is great. They've got these sort of geometric designed cutouts here, and they're extremely good. The retention on this is really, really well done. And so, as I said before, it just checks all the boxes, okay? Everything that you look for. You want a comfortable knife, you want it to be big enough, you want it to be strong enough. It just nails it. Every single category, this knife just bang on. Everything you'd want from a good, high quality folding knife. Okay, now it looks a little odd, I will say that. And so if you just don't like the look of it, you know, that's a totally subjective thing. What are you going to do? I would suggest, if you really don't like the look of it, but you're kind of interested, pick one up and try it. And I pretty well promise you that in a week, you'll be like, who cares what it looks like? This thing is amazing, okay? Because it totally is. Now, there's no lanyard hole, and so if you're a big lanyard guy, that's not really an option. It does have the deep carry clip here that's reversible just by taking out these two screws and flipping it to the other side. So pretty easily done. And again, I think that's a win. Does it have to be that deep carry? Probably not. I'm not a Nazi about that. You know, I don't really care if someone knows I have a knife. What I mostly care about is that I can get it in and out of pocket easily. And that, again, is a win. And so overall, This knife gets everything right, okay? So if you have all these boxes, you know, I want it to be a certain blade size, I want it to have certain size and weight, I want it to have certain blade performance, edge geometry, comfort in hand, it just nails everything. And so on paper, just that way, it's a phenomenal blade. But in addition to really getting all of that stuff right, you also get the cool factor of this very different lock. You get the Paul Boss heat treat. You get a knife that flips better than any other knife I own. Seriously, better than any knife I own. That's pretty rare. I've got a lot of nice flippers. You know, probably other than this one, my ZT 0560 or my 0562. I'm trying to think of the best flippers here. I should do a video about this. But this thing just blows everything else away. And it's not even that big. You know, it's not like you have a huge flipper sticking out here that you can really get a lot of purchase on. You don't need it. You barely touch this. Of course, I fail on camera, but you barely touch it and it just blasts out of the handle. Okay? And it's super fast and super smooth. Like, it just goes above and beyond what all of your expectations. Okay? If you, let's put it this way, if you're at all interested, you need to pick up this knife. Even if you're not interested, but you just like really good knives, you will be completely blown away by how good this knife does. It is phenomenal. Okay, so there you go, guys. I know that was probably one of the most positive reviews I've ever done, and I think it's just because of my surprise. Okay, I was not anticipating a knife that would be executed as well as this one is executed. It just does everything right, and in addition to doing everything right, it does it even better than right. Okay, so there you go. That's my take on the Buck Marksman 830. Beautiful, beautiful knife. I love carrying this thing. It is extremely addictive, and we'll talk to you later.